Hey guys, welcome to Scare Theater, and today I'm going to be debunking Gateway of the Mind, which was actually requested by the Soup Pot podcast. He wanted me to debunk this, or whatever, and make a video about it, so that is what I'm doing. So here is Gateway of the Mind debunked, or whatever. Gateway of the Mind is an interesting creepypasta about a group of scientists in 1983 that theorized that a human who lost all their senses would be able to perceive the presence of God. Surprisingly, an elderly man volunteered to be part of this experiment, claiming that he had nothing left to live for. Through a rather complex operation, they were able to surgically sever every nerve connection to the subject's brain, but he was still able to move properly. Initially, the subject just spoke aloud in a very slurred speech, but after 4 days, he was claiming to hear voices in his head. The scientists just assumed that this was psychosis and didn't think too much of it. However, after 2 more days, he was able to hear his dead wife speaking to him, and the dead family members of the scientists speaking with him. The scientists weren't convinced until he started saying things that only the scientists' family members would have known. After another week, the subject began to delve even more into insanity, as the voices of the deceased wouldn't leave him alone. He even began hurling himself at walls and taking chunks of his own flesh. The scientists had to restrain him so he wouldn't kill himself. After 2 more weeks, the subject, despite his blindness, turned his head and made eye contact with one of the scientists, and said, "I have spoken with God, and He has abandoned us." Then his vital signs stopped. There was no apparent cause of death. Creepy story, but is it real? Now, I'm sure that most of us are immediately aware that this is not real, but why isn't it real, despite the fact that it's a creepypasta? Well, normally I start with picking out things from the story that didn't make too much sense, but in this entire story, I couldn't really find anything that was extremely absurd. So let's give it a round of applause for that. And one of the only things I can really say that should prove that this isn't real is that if you do a Google search for Gateway of the Mind, you won't find any other information about it, besides what's already included in the creepypasta. However, there was a TV show called Gateway to the Mind, but that's completely unrelated. However, one thing that is interesting about this particular pasta is that it has a video to go along with it. If you look on YouTube, you can find a video that claims to depict footage of the test subject in the story. It begins with static, then cuts to some weird guy covering his face with what appears to be clay, and doing a bunch of weird stuff while also making some really weird noises. Now, I'm not sure why whoever made this video thought this would somehow go along with the story, because most of the stuff he does here doesn't correlate with anything that happens in the story. But of course, some people have actually gotten frightened from this video, but others actually leave some pretty funny comments. Like, honestly, you'll probably have a good laugh if you just go to the video and read the comments. Now, if this video has nothing to do with Gateway of the Mind, then what is it? This video, believe it or not, is actually considered a form of art. Yes, as if those blank canvases and abstract lines on paper weren't enough. The person who made this video is named Olivier de Saugazon. I think that's French, right? Anyways, the guy is unique, to say the least. He has a website called Neftis. I'm not even going to try to pronounce it, but if you go to the website, you can view a lot of the other work he has done, and they're all pretty strange. You can also view the full performance of the video I was talking about earlier on YouTube. See, he looks like a pretty normal guy. Wait, he's taking his shirt off? Okay, well, he's still... Oh, what the hell? Well, the point is, he just made this video for his little art exhibit. You know, I can't help but point out the part of the video where he clearly farts. But if you look deeper into the meaning of his art, you'll see that it isn't only a strange man fondling himself with clay, but rather a cosmological absurdity calculated by the principal matters of quantum theory, stating that they are ontologically invalid. I literally have no idea what I just said, but it sounded smart, so we'll just stick with that. Just because Gateway of the Mind isn't real, doesn't mean that there were never any sensory deprivation experiments done. In 2008, BBC did an experiment where they had a volunteer isolated in a small, pitch-black, soundproof room for 48 hours. You can find some clips from the experiment on YouTube. Now, these people weren't really deprived of anything except for their sight, and they still began hallucinating about things such as mosquitoes, snakes, and zebras. I have no idea why zebras, but they just did. There's also a form of interrogation known as white torture, in which the prisoner is immobilized and locked in a soundproof room with earmuffs and goggles. Apparently, people who were victim to this went crazy after only a couple of days. Now, sensory deprivation doesn't always cause such negative effects. Some people own sensory deprivation tanks. Now, this pretty much works by getting into a big bath-like tank thingy and closing over the top. You then just float in the water, which is pretty much darkness. Since the tank is pitch black inside of it, and soundproof, and filled with water, it's supposed to almost make it feel like you're not sensing anything at all. It's used for relaxation and stuff like that. So clearly, Gateway of the Mind, like most other creepypastas, is not real, but it was still a pretty interesting concept that I personally think that could have been executed a little bit better, but still, it was a good concept.